Hello, everyone. How are you today? Hi, I'm Rahul. I'm one of the co-founders of Peach Payments, and I'm excited to be here with you today. We're going to share our story about how we scale up in Africa, but I thought I'd take a slightly different angle on this story. At Peach, we constantly talk about how we're changing engines at 40,000 feet. So I want to share some of our experiences and what we've learned as we've built Peach Payments across Africa. So before we get into that, I wanted to share with you a little bit about who are we? Who is Peach Payments? So Peach Payments is an online service provider that enables any business to accept payments through a digital channel. So if you're a business and you want to sell a product or service through a digital channel, you would work with Peach Payments, and we would help you build payments into your websites, into your apps, call centers, phone, email, SMS. We started in South Africa back in 2012, 2013, and over the years have built significant traction in the continent. I like to say, if you shop online in South Africa today, you most likely pay with us. And as we've been growing, we've now expanded our operations to Kenya, to Mauritius, and over the years we've been able to deliver a product and service to some of the biggest businesses on the continent. Whether you're buying airtime or using a mobile network, or buying groceries from your favorite retailer, or tickets online for an event, for a flight, we work with a variety of merchants across the board to enable them on the payment side. So before we get into what is scaling up in Africa, I wanted to first understand and share, what does scaling mean to us, right? What is scaling? So in our world, scaling is rapidly growing the business. It's about building robust systems and processes that enable this growth and support it. It's also about making sure that you grow your team and process people to be able to drive future growth and help them develop their careers and their skill sets. And at the same time, you're building products that solve problems for a large number of customers. As we establish our presence in more markets, scale, all of the above start to play a role in enabling scaling our presence as well. So keeping that context in mind, we started to think about what happens when one of these, 4 engines that drive core growth at Peach Payments blows up and needs to be changed or swapped out as you're cruising at 40,000 feet. For Peach, product, people, processes, and our presence have been the 4 engines that have helped us to get to 40,000 feet and scale. And over the past 8 years, we've had to swap out each of these engines a few times already. This obviously got amplified over the past year, and as the pandemic and took hold. And fortunately, from a Peach perspective, we were on the right side of the pandemic, right? There was an immense acceleration of digital commerce and a shift of consumers towards digital commerce. And this created, an inflection point, what we call a jet stream in our business. As you can see on that little chart over there, in May 2020, we kind of went down into lockdowns across the world, especially also in South Africa. And then after a slight dip, you started to see this explosion of digital commerce across the continent. And I think this jet stream really created those points where we had to, again, start to think about swapping these engines. So for us, we've had a number of these inflection points and these shocks to our business, positive shocks. And we've had to adapt and swap out more than one engine to continue flying and to continue scaling up our business. So let's talk about what do we need to do from a product perspective. As a tech startup, you're constantly innovating. You need to innovate. It's like the great whites. If you stop moving forward, you die. However, as you scale your business, your tech needs to scale as well. From at Peach, where we realized that what worked for us for the first 100,000 transactions started to see some limits as we hit 1 million transactions a month. And while we really wanted to build new stuff, we really needed to rewrite some core systems. I definitely, like me as a founder, as an entrepreneur, I didn't appreciate this need or understand it. And looking back, I'm glad I listened to the team and that, we continue to make these decisions. And so, the two words that you tend to dread as a founder over time is tech debt and refactor, right? And I think embracing that has been one of the challenges. And really, this is where we started to first use this analogy of swapping out engines. Because when you're rebuilding product or you're refactoring code, you've got customers already using these systems. So you're really swapping out engines while flying at 40,000 feet. Another aspect of product to think about as you scale is, what are you going to build next? What problem does this solve for your customers in the current markets, in new markets that you might be going to? How do you prioritize, right? One element is, what about the needs of existing customers, and how do you trade them off against needs of your new customers? And one last factor on the product side we realized as we grew is we can't be doing everything on our own. So partnerships play a key role in creating multiplier effects for us. So, partnering with platforms that other merchants are using, or creating, win-win value propositions for our customers that enable both partners to benefit and at the end of the day, solve a problem for our customers. The second aspect of, the second engine at P that we really focus a lot on is people. So we've come to realize that as a business grows, the demands on the team also increased. When you're a small team, you're hiring a lot of generalists, people who can and are willing to pitch in everywhere. As we scaled, not everyone who was great in a 10-person startup will thrive with the same skills in a 70-people business. We realized that we needed to get a bigger engine, right people in the right roles. We also needed to help our team evolve. We had to retrain and upskill our team. We needed to make sure that we supported them through this journey, and that when we were hiring new people, they fit the needs and the requirements of the business. I cannot emphasize enough, the importance of people. And as you can see, in March 2020, we were 25 of us. Today, we're over 100 people in the team. And working in a remote environment, just scaling up how we communicate, how we take care of the team, how do we encourage, how do we grow the team, has been an experience. But it's one of the most critical engines that keeps the plane flying at the end of the day. The third aspect is process. And again, as a startup founder, the word process makes you cringe a little. You're like, introducing structure and processes kind of goes against the whole grain of being a startup. But you're constantly thinking and saying, oh, are we becoming too corporate? But you do realize that, without well-defined and engineered processes, it's hard to keep all the parts moving in unison. As your team grows, as your org grows, you create sub-teams. You start to see it becoming harder for people to engage with each other, for different parts of the product and the platform to talk to each other. And processes often become critical as the lubricant that keeps this new engine humming, right? So while we're very conscious of not letting processes create unnecessary administrative overhead or create too much complexity, but we've also come to realize that some structure and process is not bad. So introduce re-engineering our processes, looking at, hey, what's working, what's not working? Do we need to change the way we work? Do we need to change, how we operate? It is almost an everyday discussion, right? And I think that swapping that engine out is almost critical to support the first two engines at the same time. And the last engine that we've really focused on has been presence, right? So how do we grow? How do we grow our presence across the continent? And the question we keep asking ourselves is, hey, how do we deal with localization? Like, what do we need to add for localization into different markets, right? So let me talk through some of the challenges we faced as we've grown our presence across the country, across the continent. Over the past 2 to 3 years, we had really started to build a market leadership position in South Africa and started to think about what next. So we started to look at what countries to go to next, and we kind of prioritized Kenya and Mauritius as the next 2 countries. And then we started to look at, okay, how do we really go to market in these countries? And so here are the 4 things, that we looked at when thinking of a new market. We looked at laws and regulation. As a FinTech, you're most likely going to be locally regulated. So understanding what are the local laws in the country, what regulation applies to you. Is there a specific license you need to obtain before you can operate in that country? Is critical. And often it's the hardest thing to find out because there is very little information that's easily documented, or at least, it's definitely improving, but that was the case over the past 3 years, is unless you actually go and talk to the regulators and you start to engage with the regulator, it's almost impossible to find it on the internet and say, what do we need to do in this country? So for us, making sure that we always took care of this first and engaged with the right parties in the country, with the regulators, with the central banks, or whoever's regulating the payment space, has been a critical step in expanding and scaling up our presence. The second aspect is looking at the competitive landscape and understanding, going back to the first engine, the product, and understanding what's the MVP product that we need to go to market. That also has a lead time. So before you can, swap in another country, does your product's not really going to scale? And this is where I said, we keep asking ourselves, what do we need to add from a localization perspective? Localization is not just about language. It's not just about, it's about understanding what are the problems that businesses are facing in this new market, and are they the same? And they're most likely not going to be the same as the problems being faced by businesses in other countries. And so making sure that our product, your product, your MVP product, and localization are taken care of, and understanding the context about your customers has been critical. The last one, is people. Get good people on the ground in each country. You're not going to be able to run things remotely, and the first 2 hires are key. So for us, again, I know it links back to the second engine, but really people are the pillars that are keeping us going, and making sure that we, bring the right people on, have feet on the ground, has been critical to expanding and scaling up our presence across the country. As we look back, swapping out these 4 engines, it doesn't end. It's a continuous process. At every stage of the business, at every week, every month, you're constantly prioritizing what next, right? So one thing we know for sure in our life is that the next swap is coming up soon. Thank you. That was a bit about our story on how we've scaled up